Some moments arrive dressed as celebrations, but leave wearing the face of devastation. Brianna Scurry stood in the marble entryway of the Claver Winter estate, her fingers trembling against the silk of the dress Jake had bought her. The fabric whispered against her skin like a promise about to shatter. She had rehearsed this moment for weeks, imagining how she would tell him about the life growing inside her, how his face would transform from surprise to joy, how they would figure out their future together despite the secrecy that had defined their relationship for 3 years. The chandelier overhead caught the late afternoon light, scattering diamonds across walls that cost more than most people earned in lifetimes. Brianna had cleaned these walls once, years ago, standing beside her mother, who scrubbed and polished until her hands bled. Back then, she had been invisible. Today, she was about to become unforgettable. "Jake, I need to talk to you before they all arrive," she said, reaching for his hand. He pulled away, his attention fixed on the grand staircase where voices echoed down like judgment descending from heaven. His jaw tightened in that way she had learned, meant he was preparing to become someone else, someone smaller than the man who whispered promises in the darkness of her apartment across town. "They're already here," he said. Mother insisted on coming early. The double doors to the west wing swept open, and Loretta Claver entered like winter itself, taking human form. She wore white, head to toe, as though purity could be purchased and displayed. Behind her came the rest of them, Whitley, with her practiced smile that never reached her eyes, Donovan carrying the weight of being the oldest son, like a crown he resented, Grandmother Constance moving slowly, but with the authority of someone who had built empires through strategic cruelty, and Cousin Pierce trailing behind, already smirking at whatever entertainment he anticipated from this gathering. Brianna watched them arrange themselves in the entryway, a formation that spoke of family unity and shared purpose. She was not part of that formation. She stood apart, clutching a secret that suddenly felt like a weapon she wasn't sure how to use. "So," Loretta said, her voice cutting through the space between them like a blade through silk, "this is the girl. Not woman. Girl. Mother, this is Brianna. I wanted you all to meet her properly." Jake's voice carried an apology she didn't deserve to hear. "Oh, we know exactly who she is." Constance moved closer, her eyes sharp, despite the softness age had brought to her features. "You're Geneva's daughter. Geneva, who worked in our summer house. Geneva, who died scrubbing our floors while you were off getting ideas above your station." The words landed like stones in water, creating ripples that spread and spread until they touched everything. Brianna felt her breath catch, not from shame, but from the recognition that these people had known who she was all along. They had let Jake believe he was keeping a secret. When the only secret was theirs, they had been waiting for this moment to destroy her. "My mother was the finest woman I've ever known," Brianna said, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "She worked herself to exhaustion, providing for me. She taught me dignity. She taught me strength. She taught me that people reveal their true character in how they treat those who can do nothing for them." "How poetic!" Whitley's laugh sounded like glass breaking in slow motion. "Tell me, did she teach you how to seduce her employer's son? Is that the dignity she passed down?" "Whitley, that's enough." Jake finally spoke up, but his voice carried no real authority, only the weakness of someone who knew he wouldn't follow through. "Is it, brother?" Donovan stepped forward, arms crossed over his chest. "Because I think we need to address what's actually happening here. This woman, whose mother we employed out of charity, has somehow convinced you that she belongs in our world. She's been your entertainment, Jake, that's all. Surely you understand that." Brianna wanted to scream that she carried his child, that she had given 3 years of her life to loving a man who hid her like a shameful secret, that she deserved more than being dismissed as entertainment. But the words stuck in her throat because a terrible realization was settling over her like ash after a fire. Jake wasn't going to defend her. He was going to choose them. Mother, I care about Brianna. She's educated, she's accomplished, she's completely unsuitable. Loretta's interruption was absolute. This family has maintained its position through careful choices across generations. We don't throw away our legacy for temporary infatuations with the Help's children. You've had your fun, Jake. Now it's time to remember who you are. The Help's children. That's all Brianna would ever be to them. Not a woman who graduated top of her class. Not someone who volunteered at shelters and read poetry and dreamed of making the world gentler. Just the daughter of a woman who cleaned their toilets. Jake. Brianna turned to face him fully, needing him to see her, really see her. Tell them this isn't what they think. Tell them about us. About everything we've built together. He opened his mouth, and for one suspended moment, she believed he might find the courage buried somewhere beneath all those years of being molded into what his family required. His eyes met hers, and she saw something flicker there. Maybe love, maybe regret, maybe just the recognition of his own weakness. Then his grandmother spoke again, her voice carrying the weight of family history and expectation and money that stretched back generations. We know about your grandmother, dear, the one who had several children by several different men. We know about your aunts who have been through multiple marriages. We know that instability runs in your bloodline like a genetic flaw. Did you really think we wouldn't investigate? Did you think you could infiltrate this family? The cruelty was surgical, designed to cut where it would cause maximum damage. Brianna felt her face grow hot, not with shame for her family, but with rage at the casual way these people weaponized other people's struggles. My grandmother raised 5 children alone after my grandfather died in a factory accident, Brianna said, her voice rising despite her attempt to stay calm. My aunts survived domestic violence and rebuilt their lives with courage you couldn't comprehend. You speak about them like their pain is evidence of unworthiness, when the only thing it proves is that they survived circumstances you've never faced, because your money protected you from ever having to be that strong. Enough. Loretta's single word fell like a guillotine blade. She turned to Jake, her expression shifting from disgust to something more dangerous. Maternal authority wielded like a weapon. You will end this, right now, in front of all of us, so there can be no confusion about where your loyalties lie. You will tell this girl that she is not welcome in our family, in our home, or in your life. You will do this now, or you will find yourself explaining to the board of directors why you're no longer fit to inherit your position at the company. Brianna watched. Jake's face cycled through emotions so quickly she couldn't name them all. She saw him weighing his choices, calculating what mattered more, his inheritance or the woman carrying his child. The fact that it took him more than 2 seconds to decide told her everything she needed to know. Brianna, he started, then stopped, started again. This isn't. You have to understand that my family, your family or me, Jake, that's what this is. She heard the steel in her own voice and barely recognized it. You can choose them or you can choose us, but I won't be hidden anymore. I won't be your secret shame. The silence that followed pressed down on them all like a physical force. Brianna could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the life growing inside her shifting as though sensing the danger in this moment. She placed her hand on her stomach without thinking, a gesture of protection, and watched Jake's eyes follow the movement without comprehension. Then he stepped back from her. That single movement said more than any words could. He stepped back, aligning himself with his family, choosing the safety of his inheritance over the risk of loving her. Jake, she whispered, giving him one final chance. His face crumpled like paper being crushed in a fist. Then he straightened his spine, lifted his chin, and became someone she didn't recognize. Get out! The words exploded through the entryway, echoing off marble and crystal and all the expensive surfaces that meant more to him than she ever would. Jake Claver shouted those 2 words with his entire family watching, their expressions arranged in various degrees of satisfaction and vindication. Brianna didn't cry. She didn't plead. She didn't reveal the secret she now knew she would carry alone. She looked at each face in that hallway, Loretta with her cold triumph, Whitley with her smug superiority, Donovan with his dismissive contempt, Constance with her calculating cruelty, Pierce with his entertained grin. She memorized every detail of this moment, storing it somewhere deep where it would transform from pain into something else entirely. Then she walked toward the front door with her head high, her shoulders back, her dignity intact despite everything they had tried to strip from her. The marble floor clicked beneath her heels like a countdown to freedom. "Brianna, wait!" Jake's voice cracked behind her. She didn't turn around. She pulled open the heavy front door herself, stepped out into the winter evening, and let the cold air hit her face like a baptism. Behind her the door closed, with the finality of a coffin lid sealing shut. The Claver family thought they had dismissed her like they dismissed everyone who threatened their carefully constructed world. They had no idea they had just created something far more dangerous than a scorned woman. They had created a woman with nothing left to lose, and a daughter who would need to understand why her father's name would never be spoken in their home. Chapter 2, The Resurrection. Brianna learned to measure life in moments her daughter would never remember, but that would shape her forever. The apartment was small enough that Rooks's cries reached every corner simultaneously. Brianna walked the worn carpet at 3 in the morning, her daughter pressed against her chest, humming songs her own mother had hummed while scrubbing other people's floors. The window overlooked a parking lot where streetlights flickered like uncertain promises. 3 states away from everything the Clavers represented. Your grandmother Geneva would have loved you, Brianna whispered into Rue's dark curls. She would have sung you to sleep and taught you that work is sacred when done with pride. Rue stopped crying long enough to stare up at her mother with eyes that carried Jake Claver's exact shade of hazel. Every time Brianna looked at her daughter, she saw the man who had destroyed her, standing beside the father her daughter would never know. The contradiction lived in those eyes, and Brianna had to make peace with loving one while hating the other. The birth certificate sat in a drawer with one line deliberately blank. Father, unknown. Not because Brianna didn't know, but because Jake Claver had forfeited his right to be known. She had gone through labor alone, her hand gripping the hospital bed rail, while nurses offered encouragement that couldn't fill the space where a partner should have stood. When they placed Rue on her chest, still slick with birth and screaming her arrival into the world, Brianna had made a vow more binding than any marriage. This child would never feel unwanted, would never question her worth, would never believe that being dismissed was a reflection of her value. 4 months had transformed Brianna in ways that went deeper than her postpartum body. She worked night shifts at a community hospital, caring for patients who reminded her that suffering didn't discriminate by income bracket. She saved every possible dollar, living on generic cereal and expired bread from the corner store's discount rack. During Rue's naps, she sat at the tiny kitchen table and wrote in leather-bound journals she'd purchased before her money ran desperately. Thin, the last remnant of a life where she could afford small luxuries. She wrote everything. Every conversation Jake had ever shared about his family. Every vulnerability Loretta had revealed during the handful of times Brianna had visited the estate as Jake's friend from school. Every complaint Donovan had voiced about shareholders and public perception. Every detail about Whitley's 3 aborted engagements and the reasons each wealthy suitor had walked away. Every story Constance had told about building the pharmaceutical fortune through aggressive acquisition and strategic silence around uncomfortable questions. Jake had talked endlessly during their time together, never imagining his pillow talk might someday matter. He had treated Brianna as a confidant, precisely because he believed she would never have the power or platform to repeat anything he said. He had been wrong about so many things. What are you writing? Her neighbor Celeste appeared in the doorway, holding the spare key Brianna had given her for emergencies. Sorry, your door was unlocked. I wanted to check on you both. Celeste was older, with silver hair she wore in long braids and a face that had seen enough hardship to recognize it in others. She had arrived at Brianna's door the second week with a casserole and an offer to watch Rue whenever needed, asking nothing in return except occasional company. In a world where Brianna had learned to trust no one, Celeste had become the exception. Just memories, Brianna said, closing the journal. Things I don't want to forget. Things you want to remember or things you're afraid will fade. Celeste settled into the second-hand chair that creaked under even slight weight. Both. Neither. I'm writing down what happened so Rue can understand someday. So she'll know her father wasn't a monster, just a coward. So she'll understand why his family remains strangers to her. Celeste nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful in that way that meant she was about to say something uncomfortable and true. You're also writing yourself out of victim and into survivor. I recognize the process. I did the same thing after my ex-husband tried to erase me through the courts and family pressure. Brianna felt something shift in her chest, recognition meeting recognition across the space between them. How did you stop being angry? Because... Who says I stopped? Anger is energy. The question is what you build with it. The words settled into Brianna's bones, like seeds finding soil. What would she build with her anger? More importantly, what would she build for Rue? She couldn't give her daughter Jake's money, or the Claver name, or the security that came from being born into dynasty. But she could give her something else. The story of a mother who refused to let powerful people write the ending. Rue stirred in her bassinet, making the small noises that preceded waking. Brianna went to her, lifting her daughter with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to do everything one-handed. Rue nuzzled against her, seeking milk and comfort and the only safety she had ever known. I've been thinking about something, Celeste said, her voice careful. You mentioned once that you used to work in communications before. Everything. My nephew runs a digital media company. They focus on investigative storytelling, long-form podcasts that examine how systems protect certain people while crushing others. He's looking for researchers who understand how wealthy families operate. I could introduce you if you're interested. Brianna's first instinct was to refuse. She had a newborn, no childcare beyond Celeste's sporadic help, and barely enough energy to shower regularly. The idea of taking on additional work felt impossible. But then she thought about those journals filling with Claver secrets. She thought about patterns she had started noticing as she wrote, how the family's public generosity masked private cruelty, how their charitable foundation seemed designed more for tax avoidance than actual good, how their pharmaceutical empire had quietly settled dozens of lawsuits that never reached public attention. She thought about all the ways the Clavers had made her feel powerless, and about Celeste's words, anger is energy. What's your nephew's name? Brianna asked. Tate Winslow. He's good people, treats his employees like humans instead of resources. His company is small but respected. They broke that story about the governor's wife, using charity funds for personal expenses. He has integrity, which is rare in media. Brianna looked down at Rue, who was now wide awake and staring at her mother with that intense baby focus that seemed to see straight through into